Well, we're back. I want to talk about stories today not because I'm an English teacher and that's what I do, one of the things I do, but because I don't think people realize how like essential. Without it, we don't exist, kind of essential. They are in our lives. It became conscious, I think, when I was in college and I was in our university's largest lecture hall. I believe it holds 1,000 people, and the stage is wide. It's um, really an impressive building, and I was taking a literature survey course, which is means that it's lower division, and pretty much everybody has to take a literature course, whether you're go into medicine or engineering, law, doesn't matter. You have to take some general eds, and one of them is literature. So a lot of people were in this room who didn't really want to be, didn't really care to be. I was there because it's part of my major, and I was enjoying um, the subject matter. And this day, it was about Ernest Hemingway. And the professor, God, what an interesting man. He shaggy beard, very unkempt, longer hair, overweight, sweated profusely, had a bad leg, and they're all mic'd up, and he would walk back and forth on this stage. And with his bad leg, it almost could have been like a peg leg, almost like a pirate. And the mic was so close to his mouth, you would hear him kind of heaving and wheezing as he somehow like lumbered himself forward, and he would turn, and he's in his own world clearly, and we're just kind of there as visitors. And he's wiping sweat from his brow, his cheek, with a handkerchief, and he tucks it back into his baggy pants, and keeps, just moving back and forth. And he's all the while lecturing, talking about Hemingway, not so much his life, but a little enough to illuminate parts of the novels and short stories that he wrote. And he's developing his themes, he's developing the storyline, and he comes to this punchline moment. And this is where I don't think out of those 1,000 people, because it was packed, out of those 1,000 people, if even 100 understood the depth and profound nature of what he said, which was, we tell stories to stay alive. And that just, it blew me away. I just paused. I remember this moment. This is many years ago, and I still recall it so vividly, so palpably, because this was what I loved to study. This is what I loved to do: tell stories, read stories, write stories. And it was just kind of, you never had your why per se. It was just kind of a feeling of pleasure, of joy, of curiosity, of exploration, of the imagination and analysis of society, insights into humanity. And when he said that, it was like that that is what this is all about. And it's not just to survive life, but thrive in life, right? To be alive and understand ourselves, and where where we belong, and when and where we don't, and to conjure that up from not just the imagination, but the observation. Because stories, As I will repeat what he said, right? As a way of staying alive, what is the purpose of life then? Right? What is the meaning of your life? So it immediately gets to kind of the core of why am I around here? What am I doing? Whether that's today or for the whole time I'm on this planet. And to that depth, that's how I took it. And that's how I continue to take it. So I was trying to convey some of this to my students recently as we were about to read another short story. And I really wanted to, almost like I felt it urgent. I wanted them to understand why we're reading a story. It's not because it's a box that an English teacher checks off, right? And that's what you do. You read a story. Okay, good. No, not just the content of the story itself, but why tell stories? And to break down what does it mean to be alive, right? And so with their patience, we started to expand upon what that means, right? Why we tell stories. I mean, think of our brains. You, my argument is you can't open your mouth, and you could even do this with yourself, but you can't open your mouth and talk with somebody and not tell a story. I- We're constantly in the narrative mode. We're constantly recalling events, explaining situations, having, you know, plans and feelings about the future. All of that falls into the narrative mode. Once upon a time, a beginning, middle, and end, and not necessarily in that order. Side note, Shakespeare so often told us the end. He the chronology of beginning, middle, and end, he told you the end so that you stopped focusing on that aha moment and instead put your attention on the process, on how those events occurred. It's just brilliant. And that's storytelling. But stories, storying, if I can kind of turn that into a verb, which is kind of a cool idea. What a lot of my students kind of concluded was it's a way for us to connect, right, with other people, to share beliefs, to compare and contrast beliefs, right? To explain our whys and our hows and our so whats, to entertain, absolutely, but so much more, I think, to understand, to educate, to come to a place where we can agree to disagree or we can realize, oh my God, like I'm not alone. And that, I think, for humanity, for the individual, is so important to understand where do you belong and who else is in that circle? Who else is with you for like minded things? And I think stories are a vehicle that allow us to connect on multiple levels at the same time. We can enjoy ourselves and entertain each other with these ideas and still find deeper meaning, right? Deeper value, uh, an enlightenment, a clarity, a focus in our own lives as the story relates to us, as well as those around us and those beyond us in society. So, storytelling is one thing, but stories is, I think, a part of humanity, a part of being human. And in that connection, that's where that's where the good stuff happens. So let's talk a little bit about the purpose of stories, right? It a lot of the time we're not even conscious of why we open our mouths and just start spewing information. Dreams are a whole nother category. I mean, think about it. Your brain, when we're awake, we're talking, we're thinking, we're telling ourselves stories, right? We're justifying. We use them to justify why we should or should not do things. We rationalize all of these kind of dynamics in the mind. They're stories, and I think everybody has the potential to be an extremely powerful storyteller because that's what keeps us alive. That's what gets us out of bed. That's what tells us kind of, you know, what to do and to a certain degree why we are doing it. And so I believe as an English teacher, we don't just read the story to check off the box. We read the story almost like practice to learn how to better tell stories, how to embed them with other layers of complexity, of character, of insight, of observation, of explanation. And so when we read, it's work, right? Because we just read a very short story, which I think if you just put eyes to paper and nobody had no distraction, it would take you about 15 minutes, even for a kind of moderate to slow reader. So very quick. But I take a good 45 minutes to work through this story. And at first it's like, come on, let's just keep reading because that's what our brains like to do. It's why when you write something, an English teacher will always tell you go back and proofread, right? The brain's like, nah, man, it's there, it's fine, it looks good. Trust me, it just keep going, as if it were like a road with potholes. The eyes just want to keep rolling through it, right? And get to that destination. But this is to all those out there, this is a great trick before you send something to make sure it has flow, to make sure it's cogent, it makes sense. Read it out loud. Your eyes are deceiving. Eyes are deceiving. They see things that aren't necessarily true or real. Well, they overlook a lot of things, I'll put it that way. The ears, however, I always refer to them as kind of the police officers of language. When they hear something off, they wait, say that again? Like, what did you say? What, do that? That doesn't make sense. Or that's really awkward. Or I don't know what you were trying to say, but it was not clear. The art of listening is I think one of the best things we can work on. It's just shut down your mental response and thought systems and just listen to other people. It's amazing what they'll tell you, what they'll reveal about themselves. So anyway, storytelling or analyzing storytelling is useful because it enables us to pick up on some of those techniques and tricks so that we can use them in our own storytelling, right? And I don't mean just when we put pen to paper and write something down, but when we open our mouths and talk. Some people are just naturally gifted storytellers. They're so captivating. There's such a charisma and energy about them that you just want to sit down and tell me more, right? What and then what happened? So learning how to tell stories by learning how to read stories goes hand in hand, and picking up on the nuances, the way a writer will drop something in there. And it's I'd like to clarify something for all those who do read and all those who are aware of themselves as storytellers. Uh, I would say everybody is, but obviously, if you don't believe yourself to be one, then this doesn't make sense to you. But you are. You are a storyteller because when you open your mouth and have a conversation with somebody, you're telling them a story. And don't lie and tell me that when you tell somebody a story, you don't want to connect with them. Think of it in the business world. You don't want to establish a rapport. any kind of realm, business, personal, academic, what have you. When you speak, you want to connect. You want people to listen. You want people to be interested. You want to provide relevant information that will create interest, right? Even dating. You don't want to be the bump on the log with nothing to say. You're going to be quite lonely because of that. But being able to reach out in one way or another through your words and compose those ideas of beginning, middle, and end in one direction or another, that's going to help you connect with other people. So we're all storytellers. So this is for everybody. By examining, what I wanted to say was when we examine a work, when we analyze, literature, I never believe in thinking like, well, this is what the author wanted to plant into the story. Roland Barthes, a philosopher and postmodern philosopher and kind of literary analyst, wrote a piece, "The Death of the Author," that the moment the author writes something down, they kind of die, meaning the meaning is created by the reader, by your interpretation, how you see it, right? How it makes sense to you. That being said, the writer did plant some clues, some uh, employed some techniques, obviously with something that they had in mind, but it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant, what they had in mind because you are now the reader. You are now the producer of meaning. And by being skilled with your reading abilities, you can pick up on these nuances, these, what do they call 'em? Easter eggs, right? That like, aha, and you start kind of putting dots on the page, and then by taking a step back, you're like, "Oh, wow. I see an image there. I really feel I understand what the story is trying to teach me, what it's trying the message that it's trying to reveal to me." And we like to posit all that productivity on the writer, but it's on you, the reader. And so if I can help my students become better readers, they become better storytellers because they're more accustomed to the different kind of literary devices and techniques and tools that they have at their disposal to convey their feelings, to express their thoughts, to connect with their listeners, with the people around them. And the benefits of that, God, what one student, she said, it's kind of like validation, like they see you when they understand what you're trying to say. And that's in part why we talk as much as we do, why we tell stories all the time, is in a sense to be validated, right? To be recognized, to be seen. And again, for my students to really understand those pretty heavy concepts and articulate them, I'm always so proud of them, like so happy and excited for them that, they're only 17, 18 years old and they're understanding so much about themselves and their world. Um, and appreciating, quite frankly, appreciating the 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 vehicle, the value of storytelling and stories. And they're so young. I just think, oh my God, like you things are going to be slightly easier because you're just going to understand them a bit clearer and be able to articulate yourself um, more accurately. Because it's frustrating when you can't get that word, when you can't, just no matter how hard you try, can't connect with your audience, with the other person in front of you. It's frustrating. And sometimes it just doesn't work. But if you had the skills, the know-how, the tools that allowed you to have a better chance to connect with others and thus be seen, be heard, to and this is all reflexive, right? To see others and to listen to them, to understand them, to have that compassionate poise and position to 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 allow them that space where they can express themselves and you get them and they trust you. That's extremely profound development of any kind of relationship. And I think if in any given moment, if you can increase the ability, not chance, but the ability of that type of connection, those are better relationships. That's a better day you're gonna have. It doesn't make sense why you wouldn't want to work on those skills. So I wanna come back to how busy our brains are, how busy our minds are with storytelling. When we're awake, we tell them, whether we're with somebody or not. But we tell stories when we're asleep as well. I mean, that we're dreaming, right? And but dreams are what did Shakespeare said? Dreams are the children of an idle mind, something like that. And I just imagined, just all the images and craziness that we dream of, um, and yet it's so vivid, it's so real, right? We want to share it with somebody else. And I don't know about you, but I dread when people are like, "Oh my God, I had the craziest dream." You're like, "Here it comes." And the dread comes from because there's no purpose, there's no point, there's no like I know some people like read dreams and that is not a skill I've got. Um, Sometimes I guess it's like, okay, clearly that's on my mind. I'm still thinking about it. But most of the time it's just this mismatch. It's this random, like I think of like porridge with just random ingredients. And it's like this here. It's like, what do you want me to do? I'm not eating that. What do you do with that? And that's it. That's all it was. It was just your mind being busy for some time during the night. And then you wake up and okay, now I've got some place to go. I've got something to do and boom, off your storytelling goes, but in a more purposeful manner. Dreams are entertaining, if anything, but rarely I feel do they have a purpose. Thus, when somebody says, "Oh my God, I had the craziest dream," and you know they're now going to tell you their dream, you're like, okay, it's kind of a long, wild mismatch of collage of what will amount to basically nothing. But dream away. Tell me how it went. So I wanted to just touch upon that element because I think, further underlines how active our brains are with respect to the narrative, with respect to telling stories. We tell it to educate, we tell it to learn, we tell stories to remember our heritage, our culture, our our it's like photographs, right? We were back in the day, it was kind of a cool thing having a camera because the film was in these metal cylinders, little metal containers, rolls, and the film was inside the container, and so you had to like pull it out and put it on kind of this hook, and then pull it forward, and then close the door, and it was now pitch black, right? And inside, so that the light, which reveals the film, doesn't spoil it. So when you push the button, light comes in, the shutter, boom, makes an impression on the film, and then you wind it forward. So it was a process, right? And I believe you could get rolls of either 24 photos or 36. And I always had kind of the cheapy cameras. They're almost like token now, where like I've seen them at weddings, um, although they're digital. But you can send them to a app and then it'll compile them. Clever. But the thing with these cameras and this film is you had 24 shots, and if you were lucky, if you when you put it on the hook to start winding it out, if you were lucky, you might get 25 photos. So there was always like that extra possibility. But when you took the picture, you kind of didn't know what was going to come out, right? Because everybody say cheese, and invariably somebody blinks, and but there's a blur, somebody moved, and so you go through, I don't know, a roll. Typically I would, over a long period of time, so you kind of forget what you took pictures of. And then finally, boom, up, you press the button and it doesn't wind anymore, so you know you're done. So you release it and you spin the developed, well, the film that has the images on it back into the cartridge, the metal cartridge, and then you take that and you would take it to a store. You could like mail away to Kodak, and they would develop it, glossy or matte print, and you'd get it back, and it was on paper, and it was always like such a mystery. You'd be like, what did I take pictures of? You remember one or two things maybe, but there's always that third thing, like, "Oh, I completely forgot that happened. Oh my god, that happened." And this is also kind of the cool thing about photos back in the day, is that's the only one. You literally had the negative and the hard copy. You could always make more pictures off of the negative if you wanted duplicates or whatever. But if there was some incriminating picture, you could burn it, you could cut it up, like it was gone. Nowadays, I think, oh my God, right? In the digital age, you take a picture and post it, it's out there for life. Like it's it's radioactive. It has half-lives for beyond your life. Be careful what you take pictures of and you share. Be careful what you post, because once it's out there, you don't own it anymore. Kind of going back to the author, right? The death of the author. Once you post that, you don't own it anymore. It can be interpreted, it can be used, it can be read any way somebody else wants to, and or misinterpret, it like misread it. It's like, wait, that's not what I meant. Like, too bad, that's how I saw it, that's the narrative that I read into it. And that's where Barth's Roland Barthes was talking about the death of the author. That's why I don't emphasize the author too much in the writings. It's just you get to make meaning, it's in your mind, and having the skills to put two and two together, and pick up on nuances and those kind of breadcrumbs along the way. That's exciting. Like, it's why I became an English major. It's why I became an English teacher. I love that process. And likewise, in doing so, when you talk about anything from a story, when you refer to it, as long as you can refer to actual text, like this is what it said, this is what they said, then that is a place of confidence that you can speak from. That is plausible and sensible, right? So that was another element that I loved about stories and analysis, is being kind of an insecure kid, I could say anything I wanted as long as about the story, about the text, as long as it made sense, as long as I could back it up, right? Bring the receipts. Like they say today, back in the day, it's just back it up, right? Well, where did you get that information? Well, right here. Right here it says, which and if we look at that, really what that's showing is that X, Y, and Z. We're like, well, good point. So I found that so empowering, which is another was another attractive element to storytelling and writing and reading. So that was kind of really the catalyst to my that put me into where I am today as a teacher of I think 31 years. That's a long time. Anyway, stories are what keep us alive, are what give our lives purpose and meaning. They help us live, and as they explain ourselves, our situations, our thoughts and beliefs, they allow us to be a society. They allow us to connect with others in extremely powerful ways. So, bit of rambling here and there, but I hope you you have a greater respect or appreciation for the storyteller that you are. And when you open your mouth and words come out and you're talking to somebody, um, know that you're telling a story, most likely. And importantly, I want to add, even when you don't speak to others, you're telling yourself stories. And some of those stories are make believe. Some of those stories um, are fantasy. They're not real. And in particular, I refer to the stories we tell ourselves that hold ourselves back. And we all do this, right? In various ways. But the way in which we decide to do or not do something is by telling stories. And if you can't bring the receipts, if you can't back it up with something logical, cogent, plausible, then maybe it's not the story you should believe in because there's something deeper going on: insecurity, fear of, um, low self esteem, what have you. And those aren't the stories that are healthy. Those aren't the stories that are going to take care of you and put you in the best light possible, or allow you to experience your greatest potential. So, appreciate this power of stories, and I'll see you next time. Until then, take care.